Good morning. My name is Ruth Robarge. I'm supposed to be the moderator today. And evidently, Keely Schneider, who is going to give the sermon, forgot the service was at 10:30. So another fallout of the earlier service. But not to be worried. Our Reverend Kendall, in all of her magnificence, has prepared an emergency sermon. So we will muddle on, and you'll have to forgive me because I will be reading it rather than like actually performing it.
I can help.
You can help? Good, okay. Why don't you be moderator? Anybody else want to be moderator? Okay. The ultimate guy. You go ahead and moderate and do...
I can do some readings, and you can do the sermon.
And you can do the offertory, and you can do the covenant.
I need my program. Let me get the other. You'll need yours, I'll get mine.
So now that you've all attended worship service committee meeting, we appreciate your good humor about this. Okay.
Thank you.
Away, Don.
Okay, well, thank you, Ruth. You handled that magnificently. I'm Don Dickey. I'm one of the moderators. Ruth is another honored one. And this is going to be a great experiment in how do we handle the emergency service. And some credit goes to the worship team, which kept on old business. Do we have an emergency service? And finally we do. Okay, one of the things we set aside time for is welcoming guests and visitors. Are there any members here who have brought a guest with them? If so, please stand and let us know their name and where they're from. Yes? Okay, well, excellent. Hope we can see you often. Welcome. Are there any people who are visiting who would feel comfortable standing and letting us know your name and where you're from? Please.
I'm Wendy. I'm here from Austin, Texas, because Wildflower Week in Austin, Texas. And this is my niece Mary and partner Club. And I led my nephew's partner Kate, and they are experienced from.
Welcome, all of you. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so what we will do is we will proceed. The readings will not be those listed in your order of service. And do we have words of gathering in the?
I'm ready.
You want me to do those?
I'll do it.
You do them. Okay. Ruth is fully functional. She's got things under control. You can relax.
Oh, please do. Whether I'm fully functioning or not, please relax. Anthony told me that Keely is on her way, so we may do the emergency service up to the sermon and then have Keely do the sermon. So, words of gathering. From Choose to Bless the World by Rebecca Parker. Your gifts, whatever you discover them to be, can be used to bless or curse the world. The mind's power, the strength of the hand, the reaches of the heart, the gift of speaking, listening, imaging, seeing, waiting. Any of these can serve to feed the hungry, bind up wounds, welcome the stranger, praise what is sacred, do the work of justice, or offer love. Any of these can draw down the prison drawer, hoard bread, abandon the poor, obscure what is holy, comply with injustice, or withhold love. You must answer this question. What will you do with your gifts? Choose to bless the world. The choice to bless the world is more than an act of will, a moving forward into the world with intention to do good. It is an act of recognition, of confession of surprise, of grateful acknowledgement that in the midst of a broken world, unspeakable beauty, grace, and mystery abide. There is an embrace of kindness that encompasses all life, even yours. And anytime there is injustice, anesthesiation, or evil, there moves also a holy disturbance, a beloved rage, a revolutionary love, protesting, urging, insisting that which is sacred will not be defined. Those who bless the world live their lives as a gesture of thanks for the beauty and this rage. The choice to bless the world can take you into solitude, to search for the sources of power and grace, native wisdom, healing, liberation. The choice will draw you into community and the endeavored shared, the heritage passed on, the companionship of struggle, the importance of keeping faith, the life of ritual and praise, the comfort of human friendship, the company of earth, the chorus of life welcoming you. None of us alone can save the world. Together, that is another possibility waiting. So we kindle this chalice flame in honor of that possibility and in reverence for the yearning of the human spirit towards it. You okay?
Good morning. My name is Sean, and I light this chalice for justice, equity, and compassion in human relations.
Okay. May I try? Let me get a fresh one. Just want that one? Okay. Thank you. Very good job. Okay. So now please stand either in mind or spirit, and confirm with me our covenant. Oh, we're going to have a song first? Go ahead and do number 21. Stand anyway, we'll sing number 21. For the beauty of So now please join me in confirming our covenant. Goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to sing and to help one another. Now that says Song for Children, but what we have here is a moment of connection. So, we invite you to ponder for a moment a way in which you have recently experienced kindness. When someone was kind to you, or when you were kind to someone else, then please turn and greet your neighbor, especially a younger person, if found, or visitor, or someone you didn't come in with, and share your thoughts. You're Unitarians, you have more than one thought. So we'll have to do this for a little longer than normal. We can do the song for the children, and then the offertory, and then she should be here. We'll see how put together she is. It wasn't on the website, wasn't Catholic. I'm sharing what's on my mind.
I'm trying to not say the same thing, because I want to go,
Well, it's been good to take a moment and visit with each other, and now we will sing the children out to their classrooms. And now we have the opportunity to help support this church, to help fund our values. And this is something that's quite essential. And what happens is, as we increase our offerings, our ability to outreach to the larger community, provide richer services for those who are here, it increases exponentially, because so much of the work is done by you, me, the volunteers who give of their own time and make very efficient use of that money. So now we will collect the offering for our general budget, and the offering will now be given and very gratefully received. Please join me now in the dedication of our offering. We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change toward a just and compassionate society. We are expecting Keely any moment. What we may do is go ahead with the second hymn. Is that something you could do? 209? Okay. So if you would be kind enough to rise in body or spirit and join me in singing, "Come, you longing, thirsty souls."
Please be seated, and good morning, and my sincerest apologies for not being here for these summer hours. I thought you guys, like me, followed Eastern Orthodox daylight savings, but no? Okay. Anyway, I do apologize. My daughter is going to be assisting with this, and she is on her way, and lucky for us, she has kind of part two. So we're gonna get going here, and I'm gonna take a deep breath. And again, I wanna thank you for your patience and your flexibility, as well as the folks up here for stepping in and moving things around so we can still do this. Yeah, thank you. I love it. I love it. And I really appreciate Anthony knowing very well how to text while playing the piano. It's very helpful. Do not text and drive, but texting and playing the piano is okay. So the topic, food and me. So I stand before you today 25 pounds lighter than I was 3 years ago, but 15 pounds heavier than 2 years ago. In my adult life, I have been a vegetarian for a year, eliminated dairy from my diet for a few months, purchased a rebounder to exercise my cells, done the whole, that's supposed to laugh, yes. Done the whole 30 program, joined various gyms, been on Weight Watchers 2 or 3 times, dumped all caffeine for a month, taken up tennis, done Jenny Craig, tried to lose weight with special breathing exercises, and refused to eat beef for 2 years after reading Deadly Feasts. I have also waged war on lectins, carbohydrates, and gluten. Until I started thinking about and researching for this presentation, I never pulled together that list before. I never asked myself, what is going on? What kind of relationship is this one with food? It is clearly schizophrenic. The fact that I have the mental capacity and luxury to choose what I wish to eat, to opt to eliminate foods from my diet, to decide to lose weight and do it, points inexorably to the fact that this troubled relationship with food, this push and pull against caloric intake, has far more to do with what's up here than down here. When is the last time I went hungry? Ever? Mine is surely a first world problem, a challenge of the bounty of this country, of the grace of my life, and yes, of the state of my mind. I can no longer claim that I don't know what it takes to eat healthy. There are hundreds of thousands of books by dietary experts that tell us what we should eat. Yet 75% of Americans are overweight. I know what to eat, but for some reason I don't always choose what I should. I eat when I'm not hungry. I eat when I'm bored. Sometimes I eat because I simply enjoy the taste, but sometimes because I want to feel full. Americans consume 152 pounds of sugar each year, and most of that unintentionally through food-like products added to our everyday crackers and cereals. So while my relationship with food is indeed in many respects a challenge for my own mind, I am well aware that it is also a challenge of our industrial agricultural economy, of our environmental choices, and yes, of our politics. This morning, I'm going to share my thoughts on our mental and emotional challenges around food, and my daughter Harper will share her thoughts about the importance of healthy connections to our food sources. For those of you who followed my sermons over the past several years, you know that I speak a great deal about intentionally creating my life and trying not to live in a constant reaction to the things that swirl around me. I try to set a vision for what I want to be, do, represent, learn, and teach, and then set about creating those experiences as best I can through mindful reflection and intentional action. I've done this in many areas of my life with success around things like navigating through a divorce, parenting my children, and dealing with job loss. But to date, I have never applied the principles around intentional living to my relationship with food. Oh, sure, I've been on diets and lost weight. I've started exercise regimens and toned up. But I have found that these wins almost always, for me, have been short-lived. Weight creeps back on, life gets busy, and the regular exercise is the very first thing to knock off the to-do list. I've never fully embraced what it means to intentionally shape my relationship with food itself and remain true to it because it serves a higher purpose, one far more important than losing a few pounds. And why have I not done this? Maybe because I've always viewed food as, well, just a thing. I've never thought of it as a relationship at all. Food has been for me a vehicle for macronutrients, right? For carbohydrates, fat, and protein. Mostly I've thought about food as an equation. control sugar and fat, plus eat smaller portions, plus exercise regularly, equals lose weight. I've never thought of it as a relationship that needs attention and nurturing. But in nature, that is, of course, precisely what eating has always been. Relationships among species in systems we call food chains that reach all the way down to the soil, says Michael Pollan in his book, In Defense of Food. But truly, I don't feel like I'm entirely to blame for my reductionist view of food. It is what our government and the scientists have been feeding to us for the last 50 years. The current American food system was designed to deliver to the public the most calories at the cheapest price. And doing so has been the official policy of the US government since the mid-70s, when a sharp spike in food prices sent protesting housewives into the street and prompted the Nixon administration to adopt an ambitious, cheap food policy. Our agricultural policies were rewritten to encourage farmers to plant soy and corn. And the policy worked. Since 1980, American farmers have produced 600 more calories per person per day. Food prices have fallen sharply, portion sizes have ballooned, and we are all eating a lot more calories. That cheap food, however, comes at a tremendous cost. We are now overfed, yet undernourished. Science and healthcare have tried to come to our rescue. Science has broken down the intact whole foods into macro and micronutrients in a never-ending search for the specific nutrients that support our health and those components that damage it. First, it was animal fat, right? Butter was banned from our tables only to be replaced by margarine. And we all know how that turned out when later science informed us about the horrible health impacts of trans fats, which are indeed still on the bad list. We then isolated omega-3s and we came up with fish oil tablets. We realized how nutritionally deficient our milled white flour had become, so we now fortify our breads and cereals with various B vitamins, and the American Heart Association declares them heart healthy. We shifted from a mindset of whole foods to a very radical scientific approach to nutrients within foods. Nutrients have become king. And since we cannot see or taste them, we have largely left the question of what and how much we should eat to scientists. Pollan cautions that while scientific reductionism is an undeniably powerful tool, it can mislead us too, especially when applied to something as complex on the one side as a food, and on the other, a human eater. It encouraged us to take a simple mechanistic view of that transaction. Put in this nutrient, get out that physiological result. To think of food as simply fuel is to completely misconstrue it. It's worth keeping in mind, too, that, curiously, the human digestive tract has roughly as many neurons as the spinal column. We don't yet know exactly what they're up to, but their existence suggests that much more is going on in digestion than simply the breakdown of food into chemicals. Leaving the question of what we should eat up to nutrition scientists seems very logical, despite the fact that this approach to food is a complete departure from the way humans have been eating for thousands of years. Unfortunately, putting science in charge of the American diet has only created even more anxiety and confusion about even the most basic questions of food, and has diminished our ability to enjoy one of the great pleasures of life, eating, without guilt or neurosis. So we go on eating our protein bars rather than simply scrambling up a nice farm-raised egg for breakfast. No wonder my relationship with food has been so confusing. I have been reacting over the years to the newest, latest, and greatest food science in a desperate attempt to maintain a healthy weight. But a relationship with food is also challenging because unlike some things in our lives, we must eat to survive. Tackling what and how to eat isn't the same thing as thinking about a relationship with, say, alcohol, which can be completely excluded from the diet, so if you choose, you don't need to have a relationship with it at all. But we all must eat. So each of us must make decisions every day about which food and how much of it we put in our mouths. And these decisions are complicated by the fact that what we eat is cultural. It's connected to memories and emotion and environmentally impactful. Food is culture. Ask anyone who knows me well what kind of birthday cake I would like, and they will answer pie. I love pie. Something about the combination of crust and filling, the intensity of flavor that you just don't get with cake. Key lime pie, pecan pie, cherry pie, coconut cream pie, peanut butter pie, sweet potato pie, fried peach pie. To me, there is nothing better than a thick slice of homemade pie. You see, baking is a great joy in my life. And I do think that largely it may come from the fact that I grew up in the South. Southerners are not only renowned for their sumptuous biscuits, pies, and cornbread, but in general for an entire culture of food, a culture I very much grew up with. Women in the South pride themselves on their baking and cooking. It would be an embarrassment to many Southern-born and raised ladies not to be able to pan-fry their chicken, make homemade gravy, and serve up from-scratch biscuits with, yes, pie for dessert. Pork fat rules in the South, as many of you know, and I too will take my pork pretty much any way it can be treated, as bacon, barbecue, ribs, chops, tenderloin, cracklin skins, prosciutto, you name it. The pig is revered in the South and simply part of my food culture. Paulin explains we forget that historically, people have eaten for a great many reasons other than biological necessity. Food is also about pleasure, about community, about family and spirituality, about our relationship to the natural world, and about expressing our identity. As long as humans have been taking meals together, eating has been as much about culture as it has been about biology. Food is memory. For me, cooking and eating is also equated with social time, time that I spent and that now provides my fondest memories. Some of them are growing up and taking fabulous beach trips with 3 sets of families together, cramped in a 1970s home built on stilts just behind the dunes, preparing redfish and shrimp freshly caught or purchased directly off the Pensacola docks. Piles of seafood and corn and potatoes. Everyone is sunburned, laughing, drinking, and having a fabulous time, just sharing this glorious meal together. Eating Indian food with my family at a small restaurant located close to our house in a run-of-the-mill strip shopping center in the suburbs of Atlanta, long before Atlanta's foodie scene was hot and the ethnic food was in. Most of my Southern friends thought we were a strange food family. Going out for Indian food? Eating bagels on the weekend with lox and whitefish salad? And my dad often making tacos at home? No, as you can probably guess, I'm neither Indian nor Jewish nor Mexican. But despite our Southern heritage, for some reason we were happy to take on the food highlights from other places around the world and call them ours too. and doing so at our dinner table sparked wonderful conversation. And I've retained that tradition in my own family, exposing my own children to a wide variety of foods, feeding my children and their friends with those ethnic foods I grew up eating. Harper ate her first raw oyster at age 3, and she still loves them to this day. The first solid food I gave to my son Finnegan was mashed avocados, and to this day, he still refuses them. So yes, I love the feeling when people gather to cook, celebrate, and share a meal. It evokes beautiful memories for me. But food is also emotion, and often an obsession. I would imagine for most of us, food evokes some complex emotional responses. For me, mostly positive, but for some, food evokes negative emotions, shame and guilt, and that thing which sustains them becomes a weapon against their bodies, either in deprivation or in excess. With some people starving themselves to death, some binging and purging, and some obsessively eating to fill a void. Regardless of our emotional relationship with food, one could hardly argue against the conclusion that we have an obsession with food in this country. It is a focus of American life and rarely in moderation. On one extreme, we're constantly seeking more food, certainly more than our bodies need. Do you remember when snacking in between meals was very taboo? Something mothers passed down through generations as a no-no. In many other cultures, like the French, snacking remains unacceptable. But in America, the snack has not only become normalized, but glorified. I'm sure we've all heard of Taco Bell's fourth meal. I recall on a recent work-related conference I attended, not only did the conference include a full breakfast, a seated multi-course lunch, and buffet dinner, but it also included an amazing array of 10 o'clock mid-morning snacks, like granola bars, yogurts, fruit, pastries. It was truly a second breakfast. As if the conference attendees were hobbits and likely to starve in the 2.5 hours since the breakfast buffet. And while most conference goers would probably agree that these additional snack times were unnecessary, I would venture to say that had the conference organizers not included snacks in the meal planning, there would have been a riot. But the other extreme is an obsession with healthy eating. The health and fitness industry, complete with its protein shakes, supplements, diet books, diet plans, prepackaged, pre-portioned keto meals, gym memberships, and meat substitutes, is a $3.7 trillion industry worldwide. And the diet industry, a $66 billion industry in the United States alone. Don't get me wrong, most of the growth in the industry has been for some good reasons. More health-conscious consumers, a pulling away from fast food, increased interest in organics and locally grown food. Yet the health and fitness industry's tremendous growth over the last several decades has not resulted in healthier humans. It has simply become one more type of food obsession, I think. In fact, psychologists are now saying they are diagnosing patients who have an unhealthy obsession with healthy eating. Now, where else in the world would you find that kind of syndrome? So, how do we deal with our unhealthy obsession with food? I believe it must start with figuring out the emotional ties we have with food, and then sorting through them, whether those ties are foundations of a healthy relationship or not. A type of mindful eating, if you will. In her book, Women, Food, and God, Janine Roth explains that in order for us to discover what we really believe, we must pay attention to the way we act when things don't go the way we think they should. We should pay attention to what we value and how that is expressed in what we eat. She says if you do this, then you will discover how you use food to express each one of your core beliefs. The concept that we use food as a way to express some of our deepest, most closely held core beliefs is very powerful. So if making desserts or sweets was your mother's way of showing love, then are you eating those foods to feel loved? If every time you ate a French fry and a fat-laden hamburger, your friends teased you that you might become fat, then are you avoiding food in an extreme manner because you don't want to be judged? Are you mistaking hunger for boredom? It boils down to the question of how we are using food to escape or numb the feelings we're having in our bodies. You know, it does seem downright odd to circle back to the basic concept that we should simply eat when we are hungry, but it is terribly difficult to do when we have imbued food with so much cultural and emotional baggage. Identifying and untwisting these connections, I think, requires inner work, getting intimate and familiar with our own body and its cues, increasing our awareness of the emotions that are inhabiting us at the moment we are reaching for the snacks in the pantry or throwing that ice cream into our shopping cart. It isn't that we can't eat these things. I'm not suggesting that. But at least we should be aware of the reasons why we are eating them. If we know this, then I think we can learn how to have one cookie without eating the entire plate of them. In this space of awareness, we allow ourselves to feel those not so great feelings and let them just be that, feelings, knowing that we will not be overtaken and drown in them. Most of us are so enthralled with the scary feelings or stories that reside in our minds that we don't realize they are in the past and can no longer hurt us. And when we realize this, we can actually begin to feel directly in our bodies. We can feel the throat clenching of our grief and know that it's just that. We can breathe through the heart pounding of our anger. We can endure the emptiness in our gut. We can do this because we are able now to see the link between our feelings and what lies behind them. Roth says we can now discern and make decisions about our discomfort. You might decide that your body doesn't feel good when you eat sugar, that you need to see a doctor or a nutritionist, that maybe your body just needs to move more. But until you're free from these stories, any decisions you make about these things are like confessions made while being tortured. Decisions made out of grief, shame, or guilt cannot be trusted, and they do not last because they are based on the fear of consequences instead of based in a longing for truth or love. To intentionally build a relationship with food, I should be asking myself what motivates me to take care of my body, which houses my spirit. I now must determine what it is that motivates me to eat the right foods in the right amounts and at the right times. But food is also impactful on our environment. Once we've figured out why we're eating, we must next decide exactly what to eat. Food choices are so much more complex now than they were when our great-grandmothers were cooking. We can buy organic or conventional, non-GMO, wild-caught or sustainably farm-raised. We can purchase baked goods free from gluten, milk squeezed from nuts, and potato chips made from lentils. We can buy our Cheetos baked and our cookies fat-free. And apparently we can put chia seeds in anything and it suddenly becomes healthy. How do we best decide, though, on what foods to spend our dollars and whether those choices appropriately influence and shape the food policy of our country?
Hello. I'm Harper Trogue, and I'm a student at the University of Iowa, double majoring in environmental science and English. So this sermon today combines two of my favorite things. As a college student living in Iowa City, it is very hard to find fresh, quality food. There are limited places that even have kitchens. The dining hall food is okay, but most of it is fried and some sort of bread. Pizza, pasta, burgers, and fries are available every day, while different vegetables or vegetarian dishes are cycled through the week. Most students' version of a meal is a cup of instant ramen noodles. The scariest part is that this is all considered normal and just part of the college experience. There is a reason why the freshman 15 is such a common occurrence that is just accepted by all students as inevitable. I know of one grocery store in the entire town, but it is so expensive that no college student ever goes there. I am privileged that I can pursue a higher education. I live in a nice neighborhood, and I have food available to eat and a loving family. I have all of these privileges, and yet I still find eating healthy difficult. I am aware of all the systemic problems with the food that I consume and where it comes from. I am aware, and yet I still find myself participating in the very system I'm fighting to change. I sometimes feel like a hypocrite, or like simply giving up. This problem of healthy eating while maintaining a healthy environment can seem so big and unmanageable. To help keep myself from spiraling into nihilism, I took some steps to change some things about myself. I bought reusable replacements for plastic bags, bamboo toothbrushes that decompose, I reduced my meat intake, and I have a garden at home. These things on their own are very tiny changes in the vast sea of waste, but they are a step forward. They also help me stay out of the mindset that the world is already doomed and that my actions have no effect, so I might as well just buy the single-use plastic. That cynical place is a dangerous one to be in, especially if we are trying to create change. Food is the fuel that gives energy to the complex system that is our bodies. Food is also part of the natural world. It is connected to nature, life, growing. One might even say that it is our most intimate connection to the earth and its natural systems. When I was a kid, one of my teachers asked the class to think of a food that did not originate from the earth. We shouted out various food products, trying to stump our teacher, but of course she talked us through each component and found a connection to some organic being that grew from the earth. Even highly processed foods have some foundation in the natural world, but that does not automatically make them perfectly safe to ingest. We all know that the best foods for us are those closely connected to the earth and plants. If we allow our earth to grow barren and our water poisoned, then our food will suffer. Our connection to the earth and its natural systems will suffer, and our health will suffer. There used to be hundreds, if not thousands, of different kinds of corn grown in pre-colonial America. They were all adapted to their own microclimates. They were different colors and had different tastes. Now we maybe grow two kinds, one for cattle and sweet corn for humans. We grow them in large swaths of land across many climates, but all with the same plant. They need much more water to grow in arid conditions than the native plants. Here's a quote by Gary Paul Nabhan, the author of The Desert Smells Like Rain, where he writes about the Awadam, a Native American tribe in the Sonoran Desert. We sat down beneath the feathery canopy of the lone mesquite tree in the middle of the Magruder family's field, 70-year-old Julian and me. The field was fallow, the charcoal reservoir next to it was dry. It was July. Julian shook his head. Rain. That's the main thing in the desert. You just can't plant anything without the rain coming, without those washes running. Julian had waited since San Juan Day in the late June for the summer storms to come. His seeds lay ready in the wheelbarrow at the edge of his storeroom, each in a separate cache, each the culmination of hundreds of years of rigorous selection by the desert climate and the discriminating Awadam farmers. In early August, the 3 storms brought more than an inch and a half of rain within a week. By the time I could travel the muddy road back to the Magruder home, Julian had plowed and planted. That cluster of rains was enough to initiate sheet flow across 30 acres of desert floor, bringing water and nitrogen-rich debris into the half-acre field. Plant diversity in Papago fields appears to be greater than that in nearby Anglo fields and as high as the wild desert flats. We have lost so much biodiversity as we traded quality for quantity. The Green Revolution only alleviated hunger for a short time. It raised the carrying capacity of our species, or the population limit the environment can handle. And now our population is quickly rising to the new carrying capacity. The funny thing is, we make enough food to feed all 7 billion of us, but throw away a lot of it and millions still go hungry. This is not sustainable. The population is rising rapidly, but our ability to generate food will not be able to keep up. Natural systems are delicate. If too much change happens too quickly, then the whole thing falls apart. Too much or too little of anything can seriously alter them. Even things we consider good, like fertilizers, can be a problem. Fertilizers make things grow, that is true. But what happens when it washes out of the soil with rain? It goes into the water system, flows into rivers, and then dumps into the ocean. Then we get hypoxic zones. They are places where fertilizers cause algae blooms. When the algae die, their decomposing process takes oxygen from the water. So now there are large zones in the Gulf of Mexico where nothing lives. Pesticides are their own mess. The obvious problem is that the chemicals leach into the soil, plants, and water. The other big issue is that they never kill all of the pests. There are always those who somehow survive and are immune. This causes a cycle that forces farmers to increase their pesticide use in order to get rid of the stronger pests and protect their crops. This pesticide treadmill will continue to cycle until nothing will kill the pests but dangerous chemicals. That with warmer temperatures caused by climate change, the bug population is growing. This could pose a threat to food production as a larger percentage of crops are eaten before they are harvested. Monoculture and industrial agriculture have transformed the way we grow food. Iowa alone feeds millions, but this great bounty comes at a very steep price. The soil quality declines with each crop rotation. The Ogallala Aquifer is running out of water, and the machines used to tend farms put CO2 into the atmosphere. On top of all that, our diet is poor. Corn syrup is in everything, and the cheapest foods are often terrible for you. I go to school in Iowa, a state that produces so much food and feeds people worldwide, but the food available for students to consume is less than ideal. I would have to grow my own vegetables to get them, and I have been tempted. But living in a dorm in a city makes that difficult. One day in class, our professor asked us if all the restaurants in the city shut down, how many of you would know how to grow and cook your own food? How many of you know how to bake bread? The summer before, I had actually tried my hand at baking bread. The first attempt failed because the loaves would be more useful as bricks than food, but the second attempt was delicious. In that class, I imagined a post-apocalyptic world where everyone in Iowa City had to rely on their own skills to survive. I have a small garden. I've made bread before, and I know a few basics about cooking, but I would have never called myself an expert. I would not rely on those experiences to consistently feed myself and possibly others. We rely on the food industry to distribute and make the things we consume. That class in particular gave me the urge to buy a survival manual. I think with the Green Revolution came a distancing of food from people. Sometimes I forget that this chicken breast I put in my cart at the grocery store used to be a living, breathing being. It moved, slept, squawked, ate, and now it is just this pale blob of protein wrapped in plastic. I do think that dietary patterns would change if we faced the reality of how we kill animals to produce the meat we consume. If we saw the connection, we would be more thoughtful and careful of our actions. As odd as it sounds, I want to have chickens. I imagine a garden with dozens of different herbs, vegetables, and flowers, and a handful of chickens pecking at the ground. When I think of this ideal future, I can't imagine killing the chickens. I don't think I could bring myself to do it. They would all be hens raised only for eggs, and they would have funny chicken puns as names. There's no way I could kill a chicken named Hen Solo. This, however, is not a demand to go vegan. Veganism is not for everyone, whether for medical, religious, or personal reasons. The most common way of growing vegetables is also not completely cruelty-free. The labor used to work the fields and harvest all of the fruit and vegetables are often immigrants or poor people from other countries. They are paid low wages and exploited. Most of our vegetables are grown using industrial agriculture. The harvested food then has to travel across the country in delivery trucks, adding more CO2. Many are then wrapped in plastic before being sold. I probably would not go vegan, maybe vegetarian, because I love food and experiencing food from a wide range of sources. But I do not need to eat meat 3 times a day, 7 days a week. For most of our time on this planet, meat has taken up a very small portion of our diet. The meat industry right now is one of the leading causes of CO2 emissions. It takes a lot of land to house the cattle and grow the food they eat, and a lot of the practices they employ are upsetting and I think unethical. The industry is unsustainable and needs to change dramatically. I will admit that I don't always adhere to the dietary guidelines I set for myself. After all, what will it matter if I eat this pork from the dining hall? It is already dead and cooked with dozens of others just like it. But supply follows demand. If we demand more vegetarian options or simply leave the people preparing the meat with a surplus, then change will happen. I am not the first person to say these things. For decades, scientists have warned us about the dangers of our food industry on ourselves and our environment. But I am part of the generation who will see the full consequences. It is easy to be paralyzed by all of this. What can I do when so much is out of my control? When all of these decisions and systems were put into place before I was born? I remember taking classes for a major that a couple months previous I was delighted about and feeling more depressed every day. The young people of today will see the world drastically change for the worse long after those who have started it are dead. We see that and are understandably angry at those in power who continue to stop progress. In the words of Greta Thunberg, adults keep saying we owe it to the young people to give them hope, but I don't want your hope. I want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. I want you to act. I want you to act as you would in a crisis. I want you to act as if the house is on fire, because it is. Greta is a 16-year-old who holds climate strikes all over Europe. She motivates students to protest on Fridays to make more of an impact. She has spoken in front of world leaders and become an internet sensation. Looking to Greta, I think about why I want to commit part of my life to these issues in the first place. I care, and I want to make things better. Simple as that. But then I realize that I can't do that by being fearful. It is hard to help someone when you are angry. Anger has its place, and it can be useful, but actions out of love and compassion are what will truly create change, and it starts with ourselves. Thank you.
And just a few closing words this now almost afternoon. Michael Pollan, if you haven't read this book, In Defense of Food, is fantastic. I absolutely recommend it. It's a short read. He doubts that his book, In Defense of Food, could have even been written 40 years ago because there would have been no way to eat the way he proposes without going back to the land and growing our own food. He says it would have been the manifesto of a crackpot. There was really only one kind of food on the national menu, and that was whatever industry and nutritionism happened to be serving. Not anymore. Eaters have real choices now, and those choices have real consequences for our health and the health of the land and the health of our food culture, all of which, as we will see, are inextricably linked. That anyone should need to write a book advising people to eat food could be taken as a measure of our alienation and confusion. Or we can choose to see it in a more positive light and count ourselves fortunate indeed that there is once again real food for us to eat. So I ask myself, can I be a better steward of my body and of this earth? I think I can. Thank you all. I think I'm supposed to introduce our song. I apologize. We're going to stand up and sing our closing song, Go Lift It Up. Please join us.